Picking up on a sly detail hidden in plain sight for only the most die-hard fans to catch is great fun, especially if it's dropped in your lap right at the start of the movie and foreshadows future events, or somehow enhances the story. These early establishing scenes all feature a moment that passed the overwhelming majority of viewers by, and yet, for those who caught them, likely on repeat viewings, they were surely left pointing enthusiastically at the screen like Leonardo DiCaprio himself. For anyone who thinks horror movies can't be subtle, these ones all firmly proved otherwise. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 more hidden details in opening horror movie scenes. Number 10. Hinting at Bobby Lynn's death, X. Mere minutes into Ty West's terrific slasher throwback X, we catch our first glimpse of adult film actress Bobby Lynn Parker, played by Brittany Snow, as she exits the strip club known as the Bayou Burlesque. Notably, the front of the establishment is painted with a mural which features an alligator on the right-hand side of the door, which Bobby Lynn emerges from. And while alligators aren't exactly uncommon imagery to associate with a bio, in this case it harbours some very specific meaning for Bobby Lynn and her eventual fate. After all, she's later killed in the movie when villain Pearl, played of course by Mia Goth, pushes her into a lake and she's swiftly munched on head first by an alligator. That Bobby Lynn is just inches away from the alligator on the mural, and it's on her right-hand side, just as it is when it kills her later on, it's surely no accident coming from a filmmaker as meticulous as West. Number 9. Ripley's Harpoon Gun, Aliens. Who among us doesn't love some continuity porn? Well, James Cameron's Aliens opens up with some killer attention to detail. As Ellen Ripley's space shuttle is finally intercepted by Weyland-Yutani and they begin cutting the shuttle's door open, keep your eye on the bottom of the door. A small object can be seen on the lower end of the frame, but that's no mere randomly placed prop. In fact, it's the harpoon gun which Ripley used to shoot the xenomorph out of the shuttle at the end of Alien. Ridley Scott briefly showed the harpoon gun get trapped against the door when the xenomorph was jettisoned out of it, and ever a stickler for the little things, Cameron ensured to keep his prop in place when returning there in his sequel. Few would have cared if the harpoon gun wasn't there, and honestly, how many fans even remember it was supposed to be, but Cameron clearly did his homework regardless. Number 8. A sleeping bag spoils the ending, Tremors. Fun as it is, Tremors probably isn't the first movie you'd expect to be hiding ingenious details in plain sight, but that indeed it does, right at the very beginning. In the opening sequence, Val gives his best friend Earl an obnoxious wake-up call by jumping up and down on the back of the truck bed Earl is sleeping in while shouting, "Stampede." This causes Early to shuffle off the edge of the truck while still in a sleeping bag. It's a fun gag and nothing more, right? Except this perfectly foreshadows how the movie's final graboid worm is defeated in the Tremors climax. After all, the graboid perishes when it smashes into a cliff face and then falls to its death on the rocks below, in a manner that's incredibly visually similar to Earl's goofy tumble. This is the sort of subtle genius nobody expected from a Tremors movie, and yet, there it is. Number 7. Reports of Lecters' death, Red Dragon. While this is technically more of a mistake than a genuine detail, it's so fascinating that it merits inclusion on this list anyway. Red Dragon begins with a delirious sequence in which Hannibal Lecter stabs FBI agent Will Graham, who in turn shoots Lecter and leaves him gravely wounded, but alive. After this, we cut to the movie's opening credits sequence, which begins with a newspaper report on the incident with the headline, "Local Doctor Wounded." But if you read the body of the article, it says that Dr. Hannibal Lecter was found fatally wounded by the local police, which, given that Lecter survives the incident, this being a prequel to The Silence of the Lambs after all, is obviously factually incorrect. How bizarre. This was most likely a screw-up on the part of the prop maker, who perhaps didn't realise the newspaper was going to be captured close-up in the film, and so perhaps didn't bother proofreading the article? Number 6. Cheryl, Silent Hill. 2006's mostly pretty good adaptation of the video game Silent Hill has an incredibly meaningful franchise Easter egg hidden in plain sight at the very start of the film. We open on Rose da Silva desperately searching for her daughter Sharon in the middle of the night, and at one point she passes through a sewage tunnel. Keep your eyes on the graffiti spray paint of the subtunnel's wall, and the name Cheryl will be visible for a few moments. As fans of the video games will know, this wasn't just a random name sprayed on the wall by a production designer. It's the name of Sharon's equivalent character in the first Silent Hill game, who similarly goes missing at the very beginning. Silent Hill was one of the first video game adaptations to actually take the source material seriously and do something good with it, and this Easter egg was an early indication to fans they were in good hands. Number 5. Dexters Lab spoils the plot, Signs. Love or hate M. Night Shyamalan, it's tough to deny the man's attention to the finer details, and in his classic alien invasion horror Signs, he left a tasty hint of the movie's plot concealed in plain sight. In one of the film's opening scenes, we see Graham Hess's young daughter, Beau, watching a cartoon on the TV, the Don't Be a Hero episode of Dexter's Laboratory in fact. The scene shown on the TV involves a Martian getting hit with a rolled up newspaper, after which Dexter is dunked headfirst into a fishbowl. Shyamalan clearly chose this scene with total intention, given that, of course, the Hesses eventually triumphed over the aliens at the film's end, when Graham's brother Merrill smacks the alien with a baseball bat and spills water on it. It only took an observant Redditor the better part of 2 decades to catch this one, and it's easy to picture Shyamalan cackling at this animated foreshadowing going undiscovered for so long. Number 4. Sylvia's Death Kiss, My Bloody Valentine. It's always good fun when horror movies hint at character deaths to come later in the movie, and 1981's original My Bloody Valentine does this in brilliantly unhinged fashion in an establishing scene. As we're being introduced to the central characters, we see Sylvia meet up with her boyfriend John, who greets her by lifting her up in the air and planting a big smooch on her. Though it seems like a perfectly normal interaction between a couple, this actually slyly tees up how Sylvia dies much later in the film. When John picks Sylvia up for a kiss, he grabs her by the head and lifts her into the air, which is almost exactly how the miner kills Sylvia, when he lifts her up by the head and shoves her noggin first into a water pipe. Side by side, the similarity is unmistakable, yet when John lifts Sylvia up in motion, it's much tougher to spot. More to the point, who the hell lifts someone up by their head in order to kiss them? Number 3. Hoffman telegraphs a twist, Saw 4. Saw movies love providing early hints at what the inevitable plot twist is going to be, so that they can smugly cut back to it during the climactic montage revealing said twist, though Saw 4 tosses out a telling line early on that actually isn't circled back to later on. Detective Hoffman walks in on Officer Rigg when he's watching a videotape of Hoffman interviewing John Kramer's ex-wife Jill Tuck. Though it's easily missed, Hoffman can be heard saying to Jill on tape, "So why do we start at the end and work our way backwards?" And this line ultimately turns out to be incredibly relevant, given that one of Saw 4's 2 big twists is that the film is actually secretly taking place at the same time as Saw 3. More to the point, because Saw 4 is bookended by an autopsy scene which takes place after everything else in the movie, it quite literally starts at the end and works its way backwards. Number 2. Kane's Glass Shimmers, Annihilation. Alex Garland's superb sci-fi horror film Annihilation begins with soldier Lena's husband Kane returning home from an expedition to examine the mysterious zone known as the Shimmer. It's immediately clear that something is majorly off with Kane, who can't explain what happened or how he returned, before he takes a sip of water and drips blood into the glass, prompting Lena to call an ambulance. But if you look closely at the shot of Kane's bloody glass, you can see a rainbow pattern in it. This is telling because Kane is eventually revealed to be a doppelganger of Lena's husband, who was created in the Shimmer through Kane's DNA being refracted. And so, science time now, how are rainbows created? That's right, refraction. Given that rainbows are prominently featured during scenes set within the Shimmer, it's an early hint that Kane isn't really Kane. Number 1. Inbred foreshadowing, Wrong Turn. 2003's Wrong Turn is another movie you probably wouldn't have expected much in the way of a sly storytelling from, but to its credit, the very start of the movie gets a sneaky one past most of the audience. Immediately following the opening credits, as Chris is driving through the lush mountains of West Virginia, the voice of a preacher can be faintly heard over his car radio saying, "When you plant the seed into your own kin, you anger God." This is telling because, of course, Wrong Turn's plot revolves around Chris and his friends being targeted by a pack of cannibalistic mountain men who are the result of incestual inbreeding. The foreshadowing line is incredibly easy to miss because of the radio static, but is nevertheless hidden in plain sight for the most keen-eared of viewers to catch on repeat viewings.